Well, I thought it was going to be tough following the lieutenant governor. With an introduction like that, now I really have to live it up to it. Thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. Oftentimes people see the Latino vote as very distant and unable to relate to it. But actually the Latino vote is a lot more closer than you think. Oftentimes in the community you get into situations where politics plays a role on various issues, whether it's immigration, taxes, health reform, etc. And our position in our paper has often been to write positive conservative articles. And when I get approached by various people telling me why am I supporting the evil Republicans, I sit there and I think to myself, how did you come to this conclusion? Oh, well, they're against this, that, and the other thing. I said, really? Well, let me ask you a question. How do you feel about school? I said, well, I think that the schools are okay, but I said, well, how about school choice? Oh, well, I think as a parent I should have the right to send my kid everywhere. Okay, fine. How do you feel about abortion? Oh, well, I'm not really into it, and I don't think that's really it, but that's somebody's thing, but I don't think the government should pay for it. Oh, okay. Well, how do you feel about same-sex marriage? Well, that's between them, but I think there's really more of a man and woman issue. Okay, what part Democrat am I failing to understand here? And I think that's one of the things that we need to start focusing on, that factor, is that it's a lot closer. One of the things that we've seen throughout the years, and beginning with President Reagan, was that as governor of California, he had a great opportunity to learn a lot from the Hispanic community. As we saw throughout history, in fact, a prime example is we see this new movie that just came out about Cesar Chavez. Although they're taking some liberties and rewrote some of the stuff of the history between Chavez and Reagan, if you know that at no time during that history, especially at the time of the grape picking, they never protested Reagan. They protested other legislators, they protested other people, but they never protested Reagan. That's because Reagan understood the community. He met with them, although he didn't agree with them. Nevertheless, he took the opportunity to meet with them and showed them the respect, and vice versa. And I think that's one of the things that we really need to really take into account, is the fact of taking that few minutes to talk to one another. With that, Reagan was able to build himself a good relationship. He ended up introducing amnesty, which was one of the things that nobody, or not too many people, really appreciated. But the fact was that it opened up a whole new door, and it locked down the Republican connection with the Latinos. From there, we saw Reagan get reelected by 37% of the vote of president from the Latino community. Then George Bush Sr., he ended up with 30% of the Latino vote. And the thing is, with the Latino vote, when you look at it, it's not based on overall in the United States. Latinos have a tendency to congregate in the main cities, and you see it like in California, Texas, Florida, New York, which are key states when it comes to the electoral vote. I mean, California alone, you're looking at, what, 45 electoral votes? That's nothing to sneeze at. So the thing is that when you start seeing people in these areas, they start concentrating on that to bring in those extra votes. With that in mind, we started looking at the building of the potential, and what we saw was that when Reagan opened up that door, there was a lot more people that started getting involved. We started seeing the birth of more Republican or Hispanics getting involved with the Republican Party, establishing chapters of Republican caucuses, etc. And we saw that build. What took a negative turn was, and I don't think he meant it in that sense, but nevertheless, the opposition was able to spin it, was when George Bush Sr. said that my little brown grandchildren. I think a lot of people kind of got confused what he meant with that, and they spun it into something else, and it hurt them. And in the end, we saw that the Latino vote swung to Clinton, and it helped him get elected. Throughout the years, Clinton was very successful on reaching out to the Hispanic community, participating in various functions, from kissing babies, shaking hands, etc., which was something that George Bush Jr. ended up learning. So when he ran, he did the same thing. I mean, you saw him basically, and I think one of the things of being the governor of Texas, which was one of the states that has a lot of Hispanics, and not to mention being the owner of the Texas Ranger, I'm sure that probably went over real well with him and Hispanics. We saw this whole concept is that he was able to interact. George Bush Jr. to date is the president who has had the most in Hispanic votes. He ended up with 44%. Not even Obama has gotten that much, and Obama was the one who was supposed to be doing change, etc. We see that the Latino vote is, though not involved in politics as far as following parties, etc., it follows individuals. And the individuals who end up reaching out to them end up becoming winners. A prime example, the first Latina elected governor in the United States was Susan Martinez. And she was elected in New Mexico as a Republican, you know, at a time when everybody was scared with regards to Republicans and the border and etc. And here she came in with flying colors and defeated her opponents. Again, because she was able to take the fight to the community and explain the situation. Once those doors are open and we start looking at the fact that we're reaching across hands, it's not about issues anymore. It's about respect, honor, and talking. You know, once that's done, you know, even if you're opposed to each other or disagree, you know, you find that those trends open up. The same thing with Obama. You know, his success was based more on the faults of McCain and Romney. One of the things that people fail to understand is the power of Spanish media. Spanish media in the U.S., particularly television, is very influential. In the early part of the McCain race, he was able to penetrate the Latino community because, as you know, McCain was born in Panama. He spent time with in those areas. He found himself in Arizona, where there was a large Hispanic population. So a lot of Hispanics started to seek him and support him and felt a connection with him. Well, when the immigration issue came up, he stayed neutral, but eventually he was forced to take a position. And once he took the position of, you know, closing the borders, etc., a lot of Hispanics felt, you know, scared and turned away from him. And in the end, the vote went to Obama. When 4 years later, we see Mitt Romney. Now, Mitt Romney was a whole different case because for Hispanics, they see the heritage that Mitt Romney has, which is he has a Mexican heritage, okay? And he still has a lot of family that lives in Mexico. Now, here in the States, when you see CBS, NBC, etc., they're showing you about the campaign, etc. But when you watch Telemundo and Univision, they had Mitt Romney's family, uncles, aunts, cousins saying, oh my God, I can't believe he's doing this, how he's taking a position against immigration. He grew up here, he spent his summers here, you know, we come and see him, etc. When you look at the Hispanic community and they're watching this on TV, the first thing they're thinking is, oh my God, if he done that to his own family, what's he gonna do to me? And that in essence was one of the things that ended up slowing Romney's movement in the campaign in the Hispanic community, and eventually to the point where the media just buried him. And I think that's one of the things when we look at Spanish media, we have to look at it as an investment more than just, you know, something that's there. Like I said, once we started seeing this whole trend, you start looking at the fact that a lot of people are just sitting here, you know, looking at the perspective of one program when not realizing that there's other programs that are out there. And part of it is just that, it's just reaching out to the culture, trying to interact with it, and it's more than just having a beer and chocolate. You know, a prime example of that is Governor Walker. Governor Walker comes into Milwaukee. He's still very active with a lot of the Hispanic community. Something too that former Governor Thompson used to do too. He was very active. In fact, that used to be the joke about Governor Thompson and the Latino community. He was more visible than the people that we elected that sit in the neighborhood and the Latino community. So, you know, that was one of the things that we see is that once the candidate becomes more active with the community, is more visible, and it's not a situation where they have to be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but more than, you know, than just once in a great while. You start developing a form of kinship, of you know, some sort of connection where a lot of people start feeling more and more closer to it. And I think that's one of the things that we really need to start focusing on is that is to start building those relationships. You know, in the Hispanic community, we see there's a Democratic caucus. We see various Democrat groups that are in the Latino community, but there's no Republican group. There is no Republican influence in the Latino community. There's nothing set aside where the Republican community could actually reach out. And I think that's one of the things that has hurt the Republican more than helped them, you know? And I think that's something that needs to start working on, is setting up groups like this, the introductions to bridge both communities together and start working as one. Thank you.